Hello, dear teachers from Dirección Regional de Educación de Punta Arenas. This is Oscar Abel de Ramos, your regional English advisor. I prepared this short clip. I hope it's short. I don't know how long it's going to be. I'll try to keep it short um, uh, to refresh the most important information in relation to our approach to language teaching, action-oriented approach. Is called the power of action-oriented approach. To start, I want to share with you a story. It happened. I think it was. I was in fifth grade at school, primary school. The year before, I got a Monopoly, uh, and well, I used to play Monopoly with my siblings and friends, and I liked a lot the game of Monopoly. Um, but one day I decided, oh my god, I can get this money. Maybe I can trick the person in the grocery store, and maybe the person thinks it's real money because she was an old lady. I wanted to take advantage of that. So I went to the grocery store with a 50 colones bill, and I asked for a chocolate. I remember, and she gave me the chocolate. I gave her the money, and she took the money, and she was going to put it into the little money box they had. And then she looked at the bill and she said, "But this is not real money. Take it and give me the chocolate back." Then I went to play just some more time in the afternoon, but I don't know how she did it, how she managed to do it. But when I got home, my mom knew about it, about my trying to scam the grocery store. Well, that was a funny story. I just remember. Um, this story is related to language because, of course, I needed to use language. There was a language exchange, what also is known as language related episodes, as LRE. Um, in between me and the other person and the clerk at the grocery store. So this moment, if we were together in a meeting, I'd like you to think. We would do it this way. I give you some time to think. But let's think of a language-related anecdote, something that happened to you that you remember in which there is language related. Anything you remember from your childhood. Maybe you start when you started the work yesterday, anything you remember, because this the my story in the grocery store is something that's is stuck in my mind. I always remember that, and it's always funny to remember that. So if you have someone next to you, or you're watching probably the video with coworkers or somewhere, share that story with that person. Let that person know about that you have in your mind. um, well, let's get down to business. This is a question I have for you. Can you ride a bike like these two people in the picture? Well, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe the answer is no. Maybe the answer is I do, but maybe I would be better. We can always improve, right? There's always this room for improvement. So, as we always have a room for improvement, or let's imagine you don't know how to ride a bike, you can't ride a bike. So, we're going to take a riding bike tutorial. Well, you see this picture of these people. This presentation, it's going to be annexed to the video. And in this slide, there's going to be a link to the website that I'm going to show you in the next slides here. You get to the Outdoor Journal web page where they have this. It's called like riding a bike in 3 steps. How to ride a bike in 3 steps. So you see step number 1. I'm going to try to go a little bit quickly on this because I just want you to get the idea. Beginning to brake and balance. If you see, they have the 4 steps. Let's get started. They said number 1, safety first. Put on your bike helmet. Make sure it's nice and snug on your head. You cannot stress enough how important it is always to wear a helmet while riding. So safety first. Then Then now for a proper bike fitting, so that your bike is not too big or too small, then they teach you how to do it. Then you have got to get a feel of the bike, and then how the bike feels and all of that, and then start using your brakes. Um, how to use your brakes, and they explain all of that in the on the website. Then they move to step number two, and more. They call it more movement. Well, the good news: maintaining your balance is by far the most challenging part of learning how to ride a bike, and the rest should be a breeze. What's the rest? You ask. I'm just quoting. Whatever, whether, sorry, your goal is to cruise down the coast or just down your driveway, there are a few exercises you can do. Well, and they give you the tips. Switch it up to a new location. So go find another place. Then take turns, taking turns, turning left or right. It could be. Difficult and even dangerous when you're learning to ride a bike if you don't do it properly, and then speed up and slow down and repeat, so you can go in those speed changes. That's going to help you. um, and once you have mastered the movement phase, they call it movement phase, you should feel extremely confident and proud of yourself. There's only one thing left to do now. It's practice. And with step three, practice makes permanent. And they just make an analysis here of how practice makes perfect. It's better to say practice makes permanent. And well, at the end, they give you the time to, or they give you the hint that practicing is what's going to make you a real uh, proficient uh, biker. And my question is it this simple? Imagine you can't ride a bike. It's the first time you're holding a bike, and someone gives you this instructions. Number one, push off. Number two, hold tight. And number three, keep pedaling. Right. It's not that easy. I think you all agree with me. It's not that easy. Even if someone gives you or tells you about the benefits of bike riding, for example, it decreases severe heart disease risk, lowers blood pressure, burns calories, provides low impact exercise, builds lower body muscles, and enhances cognitive function. You might all agree with me that people can tell you how to ride a bike, how it is, how it feels, what you have to do step by step, as we just saw in the previous tutorial. You're going to get the link so you can visit the website. But it's not until you do it that you really feel it, that you really like it, if you like it. Um, because I want you to go back and remember, if you know how to ride a bike, if you can ride a bike, remember the first time you try to ride a bike, with those first times when you started learning to ride a bike, someone maybe pushed you, maybe a family member, maybe a friend, and they got you on the bike. Maybe you fell, you got a scratch, bruises, or you even broke an arm or a leg. But then when you started being able to, you were not the most proficient biker. You were not an expert, but you were doing some advancement that was more than before, always a little bit more than the day before or at the moment before, and that made it quite motivated. Remember that. Remember that moment you felt motivated. You were, oh my god, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. I remember first time I could ride my bike on my own without training wheels, and I remember how motivating it was. So, but let's go back to this tutorial. Imagine you say, I want to learn how to ride a bike. I'm going to read the tutorial. You go to the tutorial. Now let's reflect a little bit on this. What do you think about taking bike ride class without a bike? Mm, that probably these questions, I might give you my opinion, but I want you to really, maybe if it's possible, stop the video and think about these questions. Think about it. What about riding or learning to ride a bike without riding a bike? It's like getting the theory. Then what's next? What's going to be there? We don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to feel. Do you think that someone who watched the tutorial or read this tutorial can explain how to ride a bike? Maybe the person can tell you about the basics, saying, okay, I know you have to hold tight, I know you have to go pedaling, you have to practice with the brakes and balancing at the same time, you have to be all pay attention to the speed. But maybe the person can explain things in a shallow fashion, not so deep. uh, then is the person capable of riding a bike right after watching the tutorial? Maybe there's someone who can go and just ride a bike without anything else, but for most of the people that's not the case. And then how fluent do you think this person is riding a bike or riding bikes? Maybe at the beginning it's not so fluent. The question next is very important. What does the person need to be more fluent in riding bikes? Probably practice. uh, Practice, and that's something that the tutorial had that I liked. They talked about practice, and practice makes permanent. So practice, the more you practice, the better you are. There's no way someone can defeat that. That's true, and it's true. Exposure, in this case, the more you expose to riding the bike, the better you get. Use the knowledge. But yeah, maybe someone says, okay, look, when you do this, when you're gonna turn, you have to move your body a little bit to the other side, and then that's knowledge you have. But then you have to use it. And maybe there's some explicit study of the moves and technique or techniques. So studying or checking or paying attention is also necessary. It's not that you don't have to pay attention. You can also pay attention, and sometimes it's good and it's useful. As far as what you learned, you can put it into practice, it's going to be useful. And also, well, probably the best way or how to do all of this before, how to practice, expose, use the knowledge, explicit study of the techniques and moves, well, by immersing yourself in the experience of riding a bike. So, riding a bike is the best way to ride a bike. Then let's switch a little bit, or relate this to language learning. The Common European Framework of Reference, which is the one that came out, or at least put together the idea back in 2001 of an action-oriented approach to language learning. They define a competence, because at the end, this is competence. Competence, maybe you heard me once saying, how to think, what to think about competence. How I don't really get the idea of what a competence is. Remember the word competent. If you are competent in doing something, so you have the competence of doing that something. So the idea before on this previous in this video, being competent in riding bikes. So you develop the competence of riding a bike. And in this case, as we have to transport this to language learning, so the sum of knowledge, skills, and characteristics that allow a person to perform actions in society. That's a competence. And at the end, that's what we want our students to develop in our classes. Now we're talking about language learning. We're not talking about riding a bike anymore or using chopsticks, remember? Or maybe some of you remember playing chess. I've been talking about this. I have been giving these examples. So probably how to develop competence, probably, and that's what action-oriented approach argues, that probably the best way to look, I'm not saying the only, and they don't say the only, they say probably the best, more um, uh, approximate to reality or real life is immersing yourself in the experience of the language. Well, and how do we immerse ourselves in the experience of the language? Well, through tasks. That's what we should be doing in classes. That's what we should be doing in our English classes. And let's. I'd like to take a little bit more open stance in relation to this. But well, what is a task? A task is any activity or action which is carried out as a result of processing or understanding language. For example, as a response. For example, drawing a map while listening to a tape or listening to an instruction and performing a command may be referred to as tasks. This is according to Richards, Platt, and Weber, 1985. Look at this definition; it's old. Well, I'm sorry if I'm calling someone old by saying this is old, but this is older than me. But okay, this that's our definition for a task. But then we might say, oh, but what's a task? How do I implement a task in class, or what should I be doing in class? And here, well, remember the anecdotes. I have this question for you. Remember my anecdote going and trying to buy a chocolate bar with a Monopoly bill, or maybe you have one or any other. Well, these anecdotes, they very likely will part or were a task on their own, because that's what we do. Tasks are what we do every day in real life. We just take part in tasks, and some might be language related, some might be not language related. um, and then how to do, or what how to deal with this, or how to develop this in our classrooms. We have some components that it's always good to look at and try to come back or bring back to our heads and remember. The learner first, the action-oriented approach considers the learner as a social agent. At the end, we're part of a society, and that's what's new in the relation to action-oriented approach and compared to CLT or communicative language teaching. And it's that language is not the goal, but language is the means. Do we get that idea? It's not the goal; it's the means to act in society, to use the language, or we use the language as a resource, a means to interact in our society. The teacher is a facilitator. It's someone who's there, and this might lower the burden on our backs as teachers, and well, we're just accompanying our students. Now we have a trend on language tutoring, or we are a tutor, someone who's helping, giving ideas, giving helping students with strategies, also telling students where to go, which paths to take, but not exactly the person who knows everything. Materials, the more authentic, the better. So we need to try to find authentic materials. I know with those of you who are primary school teachers, sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. But, well, there are ways in which we can use authentic materials, try to find authentic materials. And by authentic, well, the definition for authentic is something that was not created for educational purposes, but is something that is used in real life, right? So now we have many other things. And also with materials, I'd like to emphasize the point that when materials are used, materials that the students use in real life, or that are based on their interests, of course they're going to like it. They're going to like them more, and they're going to be more into learning the language. Activities, real life tasks. Let's think of more something that relates to real life. Think of this. I think I told you a couple of uh, like sessions ago, a task in which that is a real activity. Think of it. Would my students be doing this in real life? So if you have your students doing any activities such as playing grocery shopping, will they need to go grocery shopping? Or maybe they already do it. Yeah, of course they do. So if you think of an activity you're having your students do in class, and you think, are they going to do this in real life? So that is probably a task that it's going very near, or it's quite similar to what happens in real life. So we're like rehearsing what they do in real life. Here's this is going to have a link to a post. Where I share with you some real life tasks examples. So, what to do in the classroom? That would be the question. Well, expose. The more input, the better. The more language our students are exposed to in the classroom, the better. And here is where we have that the point in relation to, should I be using English? Yes, of course. You should be using English in a class. And many teachers say, yeah, but students come in with a very low level and this. Yeah, but well, if they come in with a low level, and you speak only Spanish in class and they don't use Spanish and they don't use English in class, then how come, what's in what way are they going to develop language if they are not using the language? They are not receiving language through reading, listening, and they are not using the language through speaking or writing. So, of course, they are not going to develop any language. So, they have to be exposed. And remember, most of the time, for many teachers, sorry, for many students, the primary source of input is the teacher. And many students, the only contact they will have with English is you in the classroom. So do not take this opportunity from your students. Then produce, have your students produce as much as possible. We learn to speak. How do we learn to speak? Speaking, of course, in the beginning levels. And I'm saying beginning levels not only for kids, because we have students who enter high school with a beginner level. At beginner levels, you can't pretend students to produce long utterances or with long sentences or a complete paragraph. No, students, production at the beginning is going to be limited, right? We know that, and it's going to uh, grow proportionally in relation to the time they spend with the language. Also, to write, right? The same applies to writing. Speaking and writing are best learned by doing, writing and speaking. Do not focus too much on form. And here, it's the idea is that remember the goal is not the language, but the goal is to be a social agent. So here, do not focus that much on form. Means that we don't really have to stop too much and explain grammar that much. Maybe you already know that I think about that. And if you go and read about action-oriented approach, it's that. That's what it is. We don't really have to spend a long class with grammar. I have told you. I'm sorry, I hit the microphone. And we have discussed this that maybe you spend a whole week, 5 lessons, 3 lessons, explaining a grammar point, and then next class they come next week and they know nothing, and you thought they knew, and they come to the exam and they know nothing. Of course, maybe because they are not prepared for that grammar. That's a point I have been discussing with you. But I just want you to think about it right now. Do not spend too much time on form, and then immerse. Of course, surround your students with the target language during your class. This could be the only contact they have with the language, as I was saying before. Final questions about the finish. Do you want your students to know about riding bikes? And look at this girl, this little girl. She's explaining the other kid how to ride a bike. Do you want a student to be like this girl? She's very good explaining how to ride a bike. Or do you want your students to actually ride a bike, go out and ride a bike? You want your students to be able to explain how to use language, or to explain what the verb be is, or you want your students to be able to hold a simple conversation with another person, or get a job at a call center, or develop a very good professional career because they have a good language use? Well, that's a question I want to leave there for you. And I want to finish with this idea. Authenticity in the classroom can only bring authenticity in the acquisition of an L2. So the more authentic our classrooms are, the more authentic learning of a second language is. Final thought, remember your English classes back in school. For many, many people that I have talked to, many people say, I don't like English. English is not for me. They even use the word hate, and they say, I hate English. I hated English when I was in school. I hate it today. And I always say, you don't hate English. What you didn't like was not English. You didn't like the way you were taught English. And that was very likely the teacher at that moment, the teacher's bad. So be the teacher who promotes language use. Be the teacher who makes other students like English. If your students come to class and say, I like English, I want to be a teacher, I just want to learn English, or they see students are enjoying the class, great. Great. That's what we have to do. If your students come to your class and they have a good time using English, having contact with English, great, great, because they're going to develop skills for sure. Thank you very much, and I hope you the best for your work in the classroom. Thank you very much for being the teachers of Dirección Regional de Educación Punta Arenas.